On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president.
This is absolutely devastating. This is the moment that changes everything, because what just happened in the last few hours, what Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell just did on camera, this isn't just some bureaucratic disagreement between a president and a central banker. This is a direct accusation of criminality. This is Powell standing in front of cameras and essentially saying Donald Trump is using the justice system as a weapon to intimidate him into doing what benefits Trump's billionaire friends. And Powell is saying no. He's drawing a line, he's making it public, and Trump's White House is in complete meltdown mode right now, trying to figure out how to respond to this. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, please subscribe, because you might think you are but aren't. Your subscription actually matters here. That's why we built Patrick Smith Show, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. So Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, someone Trump himself appointed back in his first term, just released a video statement tonight. And when I tell you this video is explosive, I mean it in every sense of that word. Powell is measured, he's calm, he's professional, but what he's saying is absolutely incendiary. He's accusing the Trump administration of threatening him with criminal charges, not because he did anything wrong, not because there's actual evidence of wrongdoing, but because he won't lower interest rates the way Trump wants him to, because he won't turn monetary policy into a tool for Trump's political agenda, because he won't sacrifice the independence of the Federal Reserve to make Trump's billionaire buddies richer. Share this video with everyone you know, because this connects to everything we've been covering. The economic disaster Trump has created with his tariffs, the complete collapse of manufacturing jobs, the way Trump constantly needs scapegoats for his failures. And now Powell is calling it out publicly. He's saying the quiet part out loud, that Trump is trying to intimidate the Fed into submission, that this isn't about oversight or accountability. This is about power. This is about control. This is about Trump trying to bend every institution in government to serve his personal interests. Now let me give you the context you need to understand why this is such a massive deal. Because Trump and Powell have been at odds for Trump's entire term. Trump has been publicly attacking Powell on social media, calling him incompetent, saying he's destroying the economy by keeping interest rates too high, and Trump wants those rates slashed. He wants borrowing to be cheap. He wants his wealthy friends to be able to leverage more debt, to finance more deals, to pump asset prices higher. That's what low interest rates do. They inflate asset bubbles. They make rich people richer, and Trump desperately wants that because he thinks it makes the economy look good and helps him politically. But Powell has been resisting, not because he has some personal vendetta against Trump, but because his job is to manage inflation and maintain economic stability. And you can't just slash interest rates because a president demands it. That's not how the Fed is supposed to work. The whole point of having an independent central bank is so that monetary policy doesn't become a political tool, so that presidents can't just print money or manipulate credit markets to juice the economy right before an election and then deal with the consequences later. The Fed is supposed to make decisions based on data and economic fundamentals, not based on what's politically convenient for whoever occupies the White House. Make sure you're subscribed to Patrick Smith Show, because here's where it gets really interesting. A few weeks back, Trump and Powell met in person. They were touring the construction of a new Federal Reserve building. And during that meeting, Trump started lying. Right there on camera, started claiming the project was running billions over budget, started inflating numbers, started adding costs from completely separate renovation projects that happened years ago and acting like they were part of current spending. And Powell, right there to Trump's face, corrected him, called him out, said that's not accurate, said you're including a building that was finished 5 years ago, said you're adding things that aren't part of this project. And Trump just crumbled. You could see it on his face. He got confronted with facts in real time and he had no comeback. He just moved on, changed the subject, started talking about something else, because that's what Trump does when he gets caught lying. He doesn't admit it. He doesn't apologize. He just pivots and hopes everyone forgets. But Powell didn't forget. And more importantly, Powell documented it. That interaction, that moment where Trump tried to lie about Fed spending and got called out, that's now part of the public record, and Trump hates it. Absolutely hates it. So what did Trump do? He started threatening legal action, started saying he wanted to sue Powell for incompetence, started floating the idea publicly that maybe he should fire Powell, even though the president doesn't have that authority, even though the whole structure of the Fed is designed to prevent exactly that kind of political interference. Trump doesn't care about the law. Trump doesn't care about institutional norms. Trump cares about getting what he wants. And what he wants is Powell gone so he can install someone who'll do his bidding, someone who'll slash rates, someone who'll turn the Fed into a branch of the Trump political operation. Think about what that means. Trump has been telegraphing this for months, saying Powell is always too late with rate cuts, saying the Fed is responsible for the economy struggling, saying that billions are being wasted on Fed building projects, creating this narrative where Powell is the villain and Trump is the hero trying to save taxpayers from bureaucratic waste. It's all propaganda. It's all setting up justification for what Trump really wants to do, which is remove Powell and take control of monetary policy for his own political benefit. And then, last Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening criminal indictment against Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve. For what? For testimony he gave to the Senate Banking Committee last June about building renovations. That's the pretext. That's the excuse they're using. But Powell knows exactly what this is really about. And tonight, he said it publicly. Let me tell you what Powell said in this video, because his words are incredibly powerful. He starts by acknowledging the subpoenas, says he has deep respect for the rule of law, says no one is above the law, not even the Fed chair. But then he says this action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. He's connecting the dots. He's saying this isn't an isolated legal matter. This is part of a pattern. This is intimidation. This is retaliation. Powell says the threat is not about his testimony. It's not about building renovations. It's not about congressional oversight. Those are pretexts. The real reason, the actual reason for these criminal charges being threatened, is that the Fed is setting interest rates based on economic analysis rather than following the president's preferences. Powell is stating it explicitly. This is about monetary policy. This is about Trump trying to force the Fed to do what he wants through intimidation and the threat of prosecution. And you should know Powell goes even further. He says this is about whether the Fed will be able to continue setting rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether monetary policy will be directed by political pressure. He's framing this as a fundamental question about the independence of the Federal Reserve, about whether America will have an independent central bank or whether the Fed becomes just another agency controlled by the White House and subject to presidential whims. Powell talks about his service under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats, says he's always carried out his duties without political fear or favor, focused solely on the Fed's mandate of price stability and maximum employment. And then he says public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. He says he will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed him to do with integrity and commitment to serving the American people. That's Powell throwing down the gauntlet. That's Powell saying you can threaten me all you want. I'm not backing down. I'm not resigning. I'm not changing policy to please you. I'm doing my job regardless of consequences. Now let's talk about why this is so significant beyond just the immediate drama. First, Powell is a Trump appointee. Trump picked him for this job during his first term, and now Powell is publicly accusing Trump of criminal abuse of power. That's not some Democratic partisan attacking Trump. That's Trump's own guy saying this has gone too far, that this crosses lines that cannot be crossed, that fundamental institutions are under assault. When your own appointees start speaking out against you like this, that tells you something about how far off the rails things have gone. Second, Powell is not some random mid-level official. He's the chair of the Federal Reserve, one of the most powerful economic positions in the world, the the person who influences interest rates that affect every American who has a mortgage or a car loan or a credit card, the person whose decisions move global financial markets. And he's saying publicly that he's being threatened with criminal prosecution to force him to change policy. That's banana republic stuff. That's the kind of thing that happens in countries with authoritarian regimes, where every institution is subservient to the leader. That's not supposed to happen in the United States. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, because third, this represents a turning point in how people within government are responding to Trump. For years, people have complained privately. They've leaked to reporters anonymously. They've expressed concern in coded language, but they haven't stood up publicly and said what Powell just said. They've been too afraid of retaliation, too worried about their careers, too concerned about becoming Trump's next target. But Powell just did what so many others have been too scared to do. He named it publicly. He called it out. He drew a line. And that changes the calculation for everyone else who's been on the fence about speaking up. Think about what that means for Trump's political position right now. Trump is already at historic lows in approval ratings. He's already dealing with economic disasters from his tariff policies. He's already got Republicans in Congress openly rebelling against him on foreign policy. He's already facing scandals about Epstein connections that he can't make go away. And now the chair of the Federal Reserve, someone who should be an ally, is publicly accusing him of criminal intimidation. That's not a political opponent making that accusation. That's an independent official with credibility saying the administration is breaking the law. And Trump's advisors know this is bad. Howard Lutnick, Scott Bessent, the people running economic policy, they've been telling Trump that going to war with Powell is idiotic. They know how financial markets would react if Trump actually succeeded in removing Powell or intimidating him into changing policy. They know that investor confidence depends on Fed independence. They know that if the world thinks Trump controls monetary policy, that dollar credibility gets destroyed. That capital starts fleeing the United States. That borrowing costs actually go up rather than down, because no one trusts American debt anymore. Trump's own advisors have been trying to restrain him on this, and Trump ignored them. Went ahead with the DOJ subpoenas anyway, and now it's blown up in his face. The broader pattern here connects to everything else we've been documenting on this channel. Trump needs scapegoats. He needs villains to blame for his failures. The economy is tanking because of his tariffs, but he can't admit that, so he blames Powell. Manufacturing jobs are disappearing, but he can't take responsibility, so he blames Powell. Inflation isn't responding the way he promised, but he can't acknowledge his policies failed, so he blames Powell. This is classic authoritarian playbook. Find someone to blame. Create a narrative where they're the problem. Rally your supporters against them, and then use that as justification to seize more control. Trump has been building this narrative for months, that the Fed is wasting billions on building projects, that Powell is incompetent, that interest rates are too high because of bureaucratic stupidity. None of that is true. The building renovations are routine maintenance of historic properties. The costs are in line with projections. Interest rates are set based on economic data about inflation and employment. But Trump doesn't care about truth. Trump cares about creating a story that lets him justify removing Powell and installing someone who'll do what he wants. And what Powell did tonight disrupts that entire narrative. Powell is saying publicly that Trump's accusations are pretexts, that this isn't about building costs or incompetence or waste, that this is about Trump trying to control monetary policy through intimidation. That makes it much harder for Trump to play the victim, much harder to claim he's just trying to provide oversight and accountability. Powell called him out, named what Trump is doing, made it explicit, and that changes how everyone else will cover this story going forward. The criminal charges angle is particularly significant because DOJ serving subpoenas threatening indictment against the Fed chair is unprecedented. That has never happened before in American history. The Fed has always had independence from political prosecution precisely because you can't have monetary policy being made by people who are afraid of going to jail if they make decisions politicians don't like. The whole structure is designed to insulate the Fed from exactly this kind of pressure, and Trump is trying to blow right through those protections. Powell, saying this should be seen in the broader context of administration threats, acknowledges that this isn't isolated, that there's been ongoing pressure, that Trump has been trying to intimidate him through public attacks and private messages, and now through the threat of criminal prosecution. That's a pattern of obstruction. That's abuse of power. That's the kind of thing that gets presidents impeached or prosecuted after they leave office. Powell is documenting it, creating a record, making it clear that what Trump is doing crosses fundamental lines. Now let's talk about what this means for Trump's remaining time in office. Because Powell going public like this signals something important. It signals that Trump is politically weak enough that people feel safe pushing back, that the fear factor that kept people in line is dissipating, that officials are looking at Trump's poll numbers and his party turning against him and the investigations closing in, and they're concluding that the risk of opposing Trump is lower than the risk of going along with him. That's a massive shift. That's how political coalitions collapse. When people who were loyal start calculating that they're better off jumping ship. Think about who else might be watching Powell's statement tonight. Other cabinet officials who've been pressured to do things they know are wrong. Republican members of Congress who've been defending Trump even though they privately think he's unfit. Military officers who've been concerned about following certain orders. Business leaders who've been reluctant to criticize Trump publicly. All of them are seeing Powell stand up, seeing him call out presidential abuse of power, seeing him survive the initial blowback. And they're thinking, maybe I can do that too. Maybe I don't have to keep enabling this. Maybe there's a path to speaking out that doesn't destroy my career. The timing of this connects to everything else happening. The administration is scrambling. They want to change the subject from Epstein. They want to talk about literally anything other than the economy they've destroyed. They want to distract from the investigations and the scandals and the policy failures. And what does Trump do? He picks a fight with Jerome Powell, creates a massive controversy with one of the most respected economic officials in government, hands Powell a platform to accuse him of criminal intimidation on national television. That's not strategic, that's desperation. That's Trump flailing and making his problems worse. The smirking from administration officials we saw earlier today at a press conference, the way they're trying to use tragedy to change news cycles, that's all part of the same pattern. They're happy to have any story that's not about their failures. They don't care if it's an ICE agent killing someone in cold blood. They don't care if it's constitutional violations. They just want something else for media to cover. But Powell just gave media a story they can't ignore. The Fed chair accusing the president of criminal intimidation. That dominates every news cycle until it's resolved. That becomes the story that defines this period, and it's exactly the kind of story Trump didn't want. What Powell is doing here matters beyond just this immediate fight. He's defending institutional independence. He's saying there are limits to presidential power. He's drawing lines that other institutions can rally around. The Fed is independent. The courts are independent. The military follows the Constitution, not a person. These are the principles that separate democracy from autocracy, and Trump has been systematically attacking every one of them, trying to make every institution subservient to his personal will, and Powell is saying no, this institution will maintain its independence regardless of threats. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because Trump has limited options for how to respond. He can't actually fire Powell, doesn't have the legal authority. The Fed chair serves a term and can only be removed for cause, which means serious misconduct, not policy disagreements. Trump could try to claim Powell committed crimes based on these building testimony issues, but that's so transparently pretextual that even Trump-appointed judges would likely reject it. Trump could try to pressure the DOJ to actually indict Powell, but that would create an even bigger crisis and likely trigger mass resignations throughout government. Think about what that means. Trump backed himself into a corner. He threatened Powell thinking Powell would cave, would resign, would change policy, would do something to make the pressure stop. But Powell didn't cave. Powell called Trump's bluff, and now Trump has to either follow through on threats that will blow up in his face or back down and look weak. Either option is bad for Trump. Either option shows he's losing control. Either option emboldens more people to stand up to him. The economic implications here are significant too, because financial markets depend on Fed independence. Investors need to believe that monetary policy is being made based on economic fundamentals, not political considerations. The moment they think the president controls the Fed, that the Fed is just making decisions to help Trump politically, confidence starts collapsing. International investors start pulling money out of dollar assets. Borrowing costs go up because the risk premium on US debt increases. The dollar weakens because no one trusts it anymore. All of that makes Trump's economic problems worse, not better. Powell understands this. His advisors understand this. Even Trump's own economic team understands this. They've been trying to tell Trump that what he's doing is counterproductive, that attacking Powell makes achieving Trump's economic goals harder. But Trump doesn't listen to advisors anymore. Trump is surrounded by yes men who tell him what he wants to hear. So he goes ahead with stupid moves like threatening the Fed chair with criminal prosecution, and then acts surprised when it backfires spectacularly. And please share this video, because the broader crisis Trump is facing becomes more clear every day. He can't govern, can't pass legislation because his own party won't follow him, can't implement policies because courts keep blocking him, can't maintain international alliances because he keeps threatening allies, can't stabilize the economy because his policies are actively destructive, can't control agencies because career officials are resisting, and now he can't even intimidate the Fed chair into submission. Every lever of power Trump tries to use is breaking in his hands. Every institution he attacks is pushing back harder. That's why Powell's statement tonight matters so much. It's not just about the Fed. It's not just about interest rates. It's about whether Trump can intimidate independent officials into abandoning their duties to serve his political interests. And Powell just showed that the answer is no. That there are still people in government who will stand up, who will speak out, who will defend their institutions against presidential overreach. That changes the entire dynamic. That shows Trump is weaker than he appears, that the emperor has no clothes. The video Powell released will be played in history classes 50 years from now. Students will watch it and study the moment when institutional resistance to authoritarianism became public and explicit. When a sitting Fed chair looked at presidential threats and said, "I'm not backing down." When someone in power used their platform to expose what was being done behind closed doors. That's the kind of moment that defines whether democracies survive or collapse, whether institutions hold or fold, whether people in power show courage or cowardice. And Powell showed courage. Whatever criticisms you might have of his interest rate decisions or his regulatory approach, you cannot question what he did tonight. He put his career on the line, put himself in the crosshairs, made himself a target for a vindictive president who will absolutely try to retaliate, and he did it anyway because he believed it was right, because he believed the Fed's independence was more important than his personal safety, because he believed someone had to draw a line. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because what happens next is critical. Does anyone else follow Powell's lead? Do other officials start speaking out? Do more Republicans in Congress decide that distancing from Trump is worth the risk? Does the business community start openly opposing policies they've been quietly concerned about? Powell just opened a door. The question is whether anyone walks through it, whether this becomes an isolated moment of resistance or the beginning of broader institutional pushback. Trump's response will tell us a lot. If he backs down, if he drops the DOJ investigation, if he stops attacking Powell, that shows he knows he overplayed his hand. That shows he's scared of the backlash. That shows he's weaker than he wants anyone to know. But if he doubles down, if he keeps pushing, if he tries to find some way to remove or prosecute Powell, then we're heading into constitutional crisis territory. Then we're talking about the potential breakdown of fundamental democratic norms. Then we're in uncharted waters where the outcome is genuinely uncertain. Powell mentioned serving under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats. That experience gives him perspective. He's seen different presidential styles, different approaches to working with the Fed, different levels of respect for institutional independence. And he's saying what Trump is doing is different, that these threats cross lines that previous presidents, regardless of party, never crossed, that this is not normal, that this is dangerous. Coming from someone with that experience, that assessment should terrify everyone. The independence of the Federal Reserve was established after painful historical lessons about what happens when monetary policy becomes a political tool, when presidents could print money to finance their priorities, when interest rates got set based on election cycles rather than economic need. The Fed was created to prevent that, to insulate monetary policy from short-term political pressures, and it's worked for over a century. But Trump is trying to tear down that independence, trying to bring the Fed under presidential control, trying to undo a century of institutional development because he thinks it would benefit him personally. Think about what that means for the future if Trump succeeds. Every president after him would have that precedent, would be able to pressure the Fed, would be able to threaten criminal prosecution if the Fed didn't do what they wanted. That's not sustainable. That's not how a healthy economy functions. That leads to currency crises and inflation spirals and economic instability. But Trump doesn't care about the long term. Trump cares about getting what he wants right now. Consequences be damned. Powell is fighting not just for his own position, but for the integrity of the institution, for the principle that some things should be above politics, that some decisions should be made by experts based on evidence rather than by politicians based on polls. That's not anti-democratic. That's recognizing that democracy needs certain institutional foundations to function, that you can't have everything subject to majority vote or presidential decree, that some structures need to be insulated from temporary political wins. The American system was designed with these kinds of checks and balances built in. Different institutions with different constituencies and different authorities. No single person or party able to control everything. Power distributed so that ambition would counteract ambition. That's Madison's vision. That's the founders' design. And it's being tested right now in ways the founders might not have imagined but definitely feared. They feared a president who would try to make himself a king, who would treat laws as suggestions, who would view every institution as a tool for personal power. That's why they built in protections. And Powell is using those protections. The stakes here go beyond Trump's term in office. This is about whether the American system can defend itself against someone who doesn't believe in its constraints, whether institutions can maintain independence when a president is actively trying to destroy that independence, whether people in positions of authority will show courage when it matters most. These are not abstract questions. These are the questions that determine whether democracy survives or collapses into something else. Powell's statement tonight gives us one answer. At least one institutional leader is willing to stand firm. At least one person with power is willing to say no. At least one check on presidential authority is still functioning. That's not everything we need. That's not enough by itself to solve all the problems Trump has created. But it's something. It's a start. It's proof that resistance is possible, that speaking out doesn't automatically mean destruction, that there are still consequences for presidential overreach. This story is far from over. Trump will respond. His allies will attack Powell. Conservative media will try to spin this as some kind of deep state coup. But the facts are clear. Powell stated them clearly. Trump is using criminal prosecution threats to try to control monetary policy. That's abuse of power. That's obstruction. That's exactly the kind of thing that should trigger impeachment proceedings. And Powell just handed Congress all the evidence they need if they choose to use it. The question is whether they will, whether Republican members of Congress will put constitutional duty above party loyalty, whether they'll defend institutional independence even when it means checking a president from their own party. The signs are mixed. Some Republicans are already pushing back against Trump on various issues. Others are still defending him no matter what. Powell's statement might be the thing that tips the balance. That makes Republicans realize the cost of continuing to enable Trump is higher than the cost of breaking with him. For everyone watching this unfold, the message is clear. Institutions matter. Independence matters. People willing to stand up matter. Powell just showed what that looks like. Showed how to push back with courage and clarity. Showed how to name what's happening and refuse to accept it. That's the model. That's what more officials need to do. That's how democracy defends itself. Keep watching because this story develops every hour. Trump's response could come at any moment. More officials might follow Powell's lead. Congress might finally take action. Or Trump might find new ways to escalate and create even bigger crises. Whatever happens next, tonight mattered. Tonight was the moment the Fed chair looked at presidential threats and said no. The moment institutional independence fought back. The moment courage showed up when it was desperately needed. And that matters more than you might realize. This is the fight. This is what defending democracy looks like in real time. Not abstract principles in textbooks, not theoretical discussions about separation of powers, but actual people making actual choices about whether to stand up or cave. Powell stood up. Now we see who else will. Now we see whether one act of courage inspires more. Now we see whether the system can still defend itself when it needs to most. Stay tuned because the next chapter of this story is being written right now, and you do not want to miss what happens next.